Hello and welcome back once again to Rage Gaming and more Dragons Dogma. Today we're back for another round of interesting, weird or useful things you might not have known about this game. And as usual, we have a pile of things split between community finds or comments from you guys on these videos, which of course I'll be crediting where I can as I go. So with that said though, let's begin. First up today, a little talk about potential cut content. This was brought to my attention by Josh, who made a video talking about this concept and DLC. So let's take a look. The description states that north of the continent is said to be home to an ancient nation. Records of its existence are scarce. There has been no contact with its people for over a century. And you know, this isn't the first time I've heard of some kind of North continent being mentioned in this game. It does feel like they're hinting at something to come if that wasn't good content. More importantly though, if you actually look at the background of that description, there's some interesting imagery. Particularly though on the left, appears to be a serpent-style dragon. When compared to the image of a lindwurm, well, it really looks like one. Lindwurms are essentially a type of dragon, like how we have lesser dragons, those messed up red ones, or the drakes in general. There's also lindwurms in this universe that you can find in, say, Dragons Dogma Online, which are these water dragons, usually found near seas or lakes, which of course we have in DD2. It uses its wing-like fins to generate electricity, so it can shock enemies easily. Also, it can spit out these gusts of water, drenching you to cause that debilitation, and then combining that water drench with the lightning ability, that's really dangerous. But interestingly, you can use that against them. If they drench themselves, they become weak to lightning, according to the wiki description. Pretty strange, but yeah, interesting. Naturally, one of the biggest complaints for this game is the lack of monster variety. We have talked about it before, that there's quite a lot of depth to the monsters, a lot of variations. It still would be nice to have more variety, and this one sounds like an interesting enemy. What do you think? Is there going to be an update or DLC focused around this northern continent? As it stands, we know there's now unused Godsbane doors around the world. We know about this continent to the north, and now we have a new monster that's not actually made it to the game, but being shown in the game via loading screens. I think there is some reasonable hope here, if not cope. Next up, we have a quick Imposters update as a follow-up from last time. In short, there is Imposters in DD2. And you'd hardly know it. These roaming adventurers you find in groups of 4, they're actually assigned as a foe, an enemy type that appears in the enemy listings after you defeat them, because you can actually attack them, and when you do so, your pawns might even call out that we need to be wary because imposter arisen are attacking us. The information we have on these guys is pretty limited. We have their name and their apparent impersonation of arisen. But thanks to another loading screen description, we can really learn what they're actually about. Most imposters are actually bandits, or sellswords reduced to petty thievery. They tend to travel in groups with one of the number posing as the arisen, while the rest are imitating pawns. So that's what they're specifically doing. It's a 4-man band imitating pawns and an arisen. Usually they're scarred in some way to vaguely represent the arisen scar. And it is interesting how when you pull out your weapons, they start, you know, expecting a fight. But maybe they view you as another band of thieves and bandits, also pretending to be the arisen and pawns and just doing a particularly good job. It is weird how they're so underused and undermentioned, but it does come up right at the start of the game as a big concern. This was discussed a bit in the comments of last time, how initially you are targeted by soldiers from the city while you're in Melv to check if you yourself are another imposter arisen. Since they know there's already an arisen in the city being prepped to take the throne, they suspect you. I thought this was just a ploy by Deezer. She knows there's the real arisen, so she spreads this rumor that there's fake arisen. But with the imposters being a real thing in the game, and now that loading screen explanation, it makes you wonder how common this actually is, and how many have been captured and maybe even executed for the crime. And I still remain baffled that this interesting detail, this occurrence in the world, isn't brought up more directly, whether that's in the story or used in an interesting way generally. Real pawns, false pawns, former arisen, false arisen, it's all cool, but it's barely referenced, or when it is, it's kind of instantly accepted and moved on. It just feels like a waste of potential interesting stories, but good to learn a little bit more about it. Next up, I stand in a very important location. This is where the Talos originally comes out of the water and makes slow progress all the way down this path past the encampment, eventually to the tower, where it'll go to the lava and fall in there if you don't defeat it. As you can see, I've actually defeated it on this save very early. This is literally the fastest you can defeat the Talos, and if you do this, you get a unique achievement. Plus, if you enter the true ending in the unmoored world, it'll be able to take down 2 monsters, 2 beacons for you, since you defeated it so quickly before, say, it lost its arm or took any more damage than that. If you want that achievement, or in general want that, there's actually an incredibly effective way to achieve it without really any skill involved. It's the master skill for a sorcerer called Maelstrom, which is basically the giant tornado summon. This giant tornado can be localized on the different spikes that you need to defeat. Because it's a very vertical and AoE ability, it's dealing big ticking damage to not just one spike, but many. You can use one of these and hit all of them in one go. If you're smart and have high spell hold, you can even double up, storing a Maelstrom and then casting one hard, sending out a second one instantly. What this means is you can actually defeat the Talos right as it comes out of the water initially, before it even makes any progress. Funnily, this is so fast that the game just doesn't know what to do, and so the Talos has to reach the first stage where it kind of checks how much damage it's taken, how many spikes remain, before it actually stops and goes, oh, you've actually defeated it. It was a commenter who talked about this, so I gave it a try, so shout out and thank you to Victor Tung. This is absolutely busted, so effective for this purpose. If you're after that achievement then, I cannot think of a more effective way to get it, so great tip for the series. Moving on, also to do with the Talis while we're here, those spikes, they're quite interesting. If you go back to them after defeating the Talos, you'll find wherever you actually broke them that it dropped onto the ground as a physical object. They're these massive spikes, but what are they? What's their purpose? Well, you can loot them. And when you do, you get a wakestone shard. So when you're looting all of these, you actually get multiple complete wakestones to use. That's really weird and interesting. Wakestones are usually made to revive the dead, right? Well, if you think about it, this is a giant stone golem that is lifeless. So I guess someone or something, as we discussed in a recent episode, the brine uses these talos as a means to deal with the dragon. The brine is the opposite of the seneschal, the dragon, and the purposes of that. So someone or something tied to the brine faction, as it were, took wakestones and turned them into these big spikes. Then by stabbing them into the Talos, gave it life. When we destroy those, or rather rip them out of the Talos, we're ripping out the kind of batteries that power it, which is why it ultimately is defeated when they're removed. Even though it loses an arm or its head at a certain point, the Talos still functions because it's not really like a living person. It is a battery-powered statue, basically. Then when we're in the unmoored world and we see the pawn goes into it and uses its own kind of power to power it, the pawn becomes the battery, I guess, at least temporarily, and obviously it really saps the pawn when it does it. It is interesting to look at this stuff though and learn about the mechanics of the Talos, because not a lot of this is explained. You have to really look for it. Pretty cool. Next up, this one comes also from the Reddit. A user called Eastern Macaron talked about how Lucasa, the pawn that actually greets you at the encampment when you first come there at the very beginning of the game, she's the lady that gives you the little like, hey, what's up wave, and the pawn symbol, the arisen symbol on her hand. She's quite an interesting character. At least initially, that's what she appears to be. Just like Rook, who is the first pawn you encounter in DD1 and how he returns in DD2, you can indeed get Lucasa, and she's a lot better than Rook. Rook remains level 1 for some reason, and as a temporary pawn, you cannot progress him. You can't improve him, you can't mess with him in any way, which is really disappointing. Temporary pawns in general, I'd love to have more direct control over. But yes, you can also get Lucasa, and Lucasa is actually a level 20 mage. To find her, you need to progress the game beyond the first introduction, right? You're too low level to get her to come with you at level 1 or 2 at the start of the game. But if you progress to say Vernworth and eventually get around level 20, you can come back to the encampment, where sometimes you'll find her standing around, or apparently you can find her at the pawnstone. Interestingly, on different saves, I couldn't find her here, so she only actually appears at a certain point in the story, so probably around the point that you're level 20 or above. In any case, she doesn't have any unique lines or anything, no story. Once again, another interesting thing that's introduced in a cool way, and you assume there's going to be more to it, and there just isn't. But at least it's an interesting thing to know that she's in the game, you can get her. Here's the details of what she is. So if you're looking for a challenge run, you could bring her with you and Rook at level 1 and struggle through or something. Moving forward, what about the Ogres? That weird enemy type that's really obsessed with women. There's any encounter where you have women in the group, you'll be warned by the pawns that it's going to target them, and it certainly does. It will rush them, grab them, run off with them. But did you know that if you're a male character, you can actually cross-dress with different female attire? The game doesn't care whether you're a man or a woman, you can wear whatever you want, but the fact that it plays into the mechanics of the ogre is really cool. So if you're dressing in any feminine clothing as a male arisen, ogres will indeed mistake you as a woman and target you and try to grab you. There's this moment where they're going to do this kind of attack where you see them start to like ooze this horrible saliva and they're locked in on you. At that point, they're going to try to run up and grab you, and when they do, they'll take a look at you, they'll hold you up and really, work out what they're holding. Hilariously, it will work out that you're in fact male and then just sort of very disappointedly throw you away. This is some serious random ass detail to this mechanic, and pretty cool that it exists this way. I did see on the Reddit though, by a user called DDT for Human, that there's an extra effect to this if you are playing a female pawn. It'll grab you and then, yeah, assess that you are a woman and kind of slime you. All that horrible drool that it's oozing out, it absolutely covers you in it while it licks you. This leaves you with this kind of slime effect for a little while, which is kind of gross. It's not a real dehib, like you're not drenched or something, but it is just a visual thing. What a surprising amount of detail to one enemy type. And that's why I say there's actually a lot of depth to the enemies in this game, even though there's not as big of a variety of them. But there you have it. Another round of things you might not have known about in this game. As usual, if you have anything you'd like to add to today's topics and discussions, or just something new that would fit in the series, please let us know in the comments. It still feels like there's a lot to learn. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.